In 1877, Cornelius Vanderbilt's death triggered the largest private transfer of wealth in American history, $100 million, the kind of sum that would eclipse even today's tech titans. This fortune, built on ruthless rail empires and steamships, seemed unshakable. Yet within 50 years it evaporated, torn apart by family excess, costly palaces, and a single fatal flaw in its foundation. How did the richest dynasty in the nation lose everything so quickly? And what warning does their collapse hold for every generation that followed? Cornelius Vanderbilt died on January 4, 1877, at the age of 82. His estate, valued at around $100 million, stunned even the most seasoned bankers of the Gilded Age. That sum represented more than the entire holdings of the United States Treasury at the time and accounted for nearly 5% of all the money in circulation in America. By today's standards, historians estimate his Vanderbilt fortune would land somewhere between $200 billion and $250 billion, an amount that would eclipse the personal wealth of modern tech founders and Wall Street titans. The numbers alone tell a story of scale. Vanderbilt's assets included hundreds of miles of railroad track, fleets of steamships, soaring real estate values in Manhattan, and controlling stakes in corporations that shaped the nation's economy. He held over 200,000 shares of New York Central Railroad stock, each certificate a symbol of his grip on the country's most vital transportation network. The magnitude of his wealth set records that would stand for generations. Newspapers of the day compared Vanderbilt's fortune to European royalty. No American had ever died richer. The estate inventory listed not only stocks and bonds, but also vast tracts of land, warehouses, and the kind of personal property that filled ledgers for days. Bankers tasked with settling the will remarked that no single private citizen had ever commanded so much capital in the United States. Vanderbilt's fortune was not just a number on paper. It was a force that shaped the very structure of American business and society. The sheer size of his estate meant that, for a brief moment, one family controlled a slice of the nation's wealth on a scale rarely seen before or since. As the probate records were tallied, the rest of the country watched with a mix of awe and envy, knowing that this kind of financial power could build cities, sway markets, and influence the direction of the nation itself. This was the high-water mark of private wealth in America, a fortune so vast that it seemed untouchable, destined to last for centuries. But even at its peak, the seeds of its unraveling were already sown, hidden in the very structure of how Vanderbilt chose to pass it on. By the end of the Civil War, Cornelius Vanderbilt had rewired the American economy through sheer force and calculation. The New York Central Railroad, under his control, became the backbone of commerce between the Atlantic and the Midwest. Freight rates between New York and Chicago dropped by half from 1865 to 1875, opening new markets for Midwestern farmers and fueling the explosive growth of cities. Vanderbilt's rate tables became the standard for an entire industry, and his empire made it possible for goods, people, and capital to move faster than ever before. But the same system that created opportunity also bred conflict. As railroad profits surged and stock prices climbed, labor unrest followed. In the summer of 1877, workers on the New York Central joined a nationwide strike, shutting down lines and paralyzing trade. Reports from the time describe angry crowds, smashed freight cars, and armed guards patrolling the tracks. The strikes revealed the tension at the heart of Vanderbilt's success. The same efficiencies that built his fortune squeezed wages and left workers behind. Newspapers chronicled the violence, and union organizers like Samuel Gompers began to find an audience among the disaffected. The impact of Vanderbilt's fortune reached far beyond the rail yards. In 1873, he donated $1 million to found Vanderbilt University, a sum so large it dwarfed most private gifts of the era. The university's enrollment grew from a handful of students to thousands within a generation, and the endowment offered a glimpse of what concentrated wealth could achieve for the public good. Yet this act of philanthropy stood in stark contrast to the way Vanderbilt structured his estate. At the core of the Vanderbilt system lay a flaw that would prove fatal. Cornelius left 95% of his wealth to his son William Henry, trusting him to carry on the business. No family trust, no central council, no mechanism to hold the fortune together. William Henry, a competent manager, doubled the estate by the time of his own death in 1885. But when the inheritance passed to the next generation, the fortune splintered. Each branch of the family gained the freedom to spend, invest, or squander as they pleased. The unity that had once powered the empire was gone, replaced by a patchwork of individual ambitions. The seeds of decline were sown not in the boardrooms or the markets, but in the very structure of the inheritance itself. Alva Vanderbilt swept into New York society with an ambition as grand as any railroad empire. In March 1983, she staged a costume ball at the family's new Fifth Avenue mansion that would become the talk of the Gilded Age. The guest list stretched to 1,200 names, each one handpicked to impress or outshine the social elite. The final bill for the night reached $250,000, more than most Americans would see in a lifetime, and the equivalent of millions today. Pearls once owned by Catherine the Great adorned the tables. Alva's own gown, studded with battery-powered lights, cost more than a skilled worker's annual wage. The party wasn't just a celebration, it was a declaration that the Vanderbilt family had arrived, no longer mere industrialists, but arbiters of taste and status. Cornelius Vanderbilt II, William Henry's eldest son, matched his sister-in-law's flair for spectacle with a string of purchases that reshaped family priorities. Between 1980 and 1900, he and his siblings spent more than $3 million on European art, including Rembrandt's, Titian's, and Ingres portraits filling the walls of their new homes. Auction records from the era list over 200 paintings and sculptures, many acquired at prices that startled even seasoned dealers. These were not investments in industry, but in image. The family's focus shifted from the boardroom to the ballroom, from building railroads to building reputations. The appetite for grandeur spilled out of Manhattan and up the Atlantic coast to Newport, Rhode Island. By the turn of the century, the Vanderbilts owned at least 7 so-called cottages there, palatial summer homes with marble columns, gold leaf ceilings, and staff numbering in the dozens. The breakers alone, commissioned by Cornelius II after a fire destroyed the original, cost over $5 million to build. Annual upkeep for these estates ran into the hundreds of thousands, draining capital that once fueled business expansion. Each new mansion was a monument to personal achievement, but also a silent warning. As the family poured fortunes into art, parties, and palaces, the fortune that once seemed limitless began to slip away, dollar by dollar, brick by brick. George Washington, Vanderbilt stood apart from his siblings, not just in temperament, but in ambition. Where others sought social acceptance in New York or Newport, George looked south to the rolling hills of North Carolina. In 1889, he began building Biltmore, a private estate on a scale the United States had never seen. The project spanned 6 years, consumed over $5.5 million in construction costs, and required the labor of thousands. Ledgers from the period show invoices for Indiana limestone, Italian marble, and custom ironwork piling up month after month. The estate's architect, Richard Morris Hunt, and landscape designer, Frederick Law Olmsted, billed for designs that rivaled European palaces. The numbers behind Biltmore are staggering. The mansion itself covered 4 acres under one roof, with 250 rooms, 65 fireplaces, and a banquet hall stretching 72 feet long. But the real strain came after the last stone was set. Annual maintenance costs soon reached $250,000, a sum that would equal nearly $7 million today. Staff wages, heating, imported furnishings, and the care of thousands of acres of grounds devoured cash at a relentless pace. By the early 1900s, the estate's operating expenses far outpaced any income it could generate. George Vanderbilt, a man with a taste for books and solitude, now found himself managing a financial vortex. To keep Biltmore afloat, George took out a $2 million mortgage, using family bank connections to secure the loan. The estate's books show a growing gap between what was spent and what was earned. Unlike the railroads or Manhattan real estate, Biltmore produced no dividends, only bills. There was no plan for self-sufficiency, no trust to shield the property from creditors or taxes. As debts mounted, even the vast Vanderbilt fortune began to look vulnerable. The estate became a monument not just to personal vision, but to the dangers of unchecked spending. Each year, the cost of maintaining Biltmore quietly consumed capital that once seemed inexhaustible, setting the stage for even greater challenges to come. In 1913, a single change to the law swept away the protections that had shielded the Vanderbilt fortune for decades. The ratification of the 16th Amendment introduced a federal income tax starting at 1% but quickly rising to 7% for the highest earners. For families used to tax-free dividends and untaxed inheritances, the ground shifted overnight. The Revenue Act of 1916 followed with a federal estate tax, hitting large fortunes with a 10% levy that would soon climb to 20%. William Kissam Vanderbilt, once flush with railroad profits, faced a new reality. His annual income, drawn from stock dividends and rents, was now subject to a tax bill that ran into the hundreds of thousands. Family letters from the time reveal a sense of disbelief. Dividends that once arrived untouched now shrank under the weight of federal demands. The family's accountants scrambled to calculate liabilities, sometimes selling shares just to cover the tax. The new taxes didn't just chip away at income, they struck at the heart of the dynasty's capital. When George Washington Vanderbilt II died in 1914 at just 51, his widow Edith inherited not only the sprawling Biltmore estate, but also a $3 million mortgage. The estate's annual bills, already enormous, now had to absorb an estate tax that claimed a fifth of its value. There was no family council to manage the crisis, no central trust to buffer the blow. Each branch of the family was left to navigate the new tax regime alone. The deaths of key leaders, arrived at the worst possible moment. William Kissam, who had managed the family's finances through decades of prosperity, died in 1920. With his passing, the last figure with the experience and authority to guide the family through the era of taxation was gone. George's early death left Biltmore without its visionary and its only real manager. Edith Vanderbilt, facing mounting debts and a shrinking endowment, began selling off land and rare possessions just to keep the estate afloat. Across the Vanderbilt branches, the same pattern repeated. Heirs inherited grand homes and famous names, but not the financial discipline or unity that had built the fortune. The new tax laws, combined with the absence of strong leadership, stripped away the family's financial safety net. By the early 1920s, what had once seemed unbreakable was now exposed, vulnerable to policy changes, market downturns, and the relentless mathematics of division. The dynasty's financial cushion was gone, just as the world was heading for even greater turmoil. Biltmore's heavy doors opened to the public for the first time in March 1930. Admission cost just $1, a price that drew 12,000 visitors on the very first day. The estate, once a private retreat for a single family, now depended on ticket sales to keep the lights on. For the Vanderbilts, this moment was more than a financial necessity. It was the final transformation of private grandeur into public spectacle. The marble halls, once echoing with the footsteps of servants and socialites, now filled with the steady shuffle of tourists. Biltmore's art, architecture, and gardens survived, but the fortune that built them had vanished into upkeep, taxes, and the relentless math of division. Outside North Carolina, traces of the dynasty's reach lingered in other forms. Vanderbilt University, founded with $1 million gift in 1873, continued to grow. Its endowment, carefully managed and periodically replenished by later generations, reached $1.2 billion by 2022. The university stands as a rare example of Vanderbilt wealth that multiplied instead of fading away. While the family's private riches evaporated, this public legacy endured, proof that some investments outlast even the grandest mansions. The private side of the family told a different story. By 1973, at a reunion of 120 Vanderbilt descendants, not a single one could claim millionaire status. The fortune, once concentrated in the hands of a single patriarch, had been split and split again, first among 8 children, then among dozens of grandchildren, and finally among more than 100 great-grandchildren. Each generation saw its share shrink, whittled down by taxes, spending, and the cost of maintaining lifestyles that belonged to another era. Over 98% of the original wealth had disappeared. The numbers reveal a simple truth. When a fortune is divided without structure, it cannot last. A dynasty that once held more wealth than the U.S. Treasury became a cautionary tale in just 2 generations. The Vanderbilt name lives on, carved in limestone, stamped on diplomas, remembered in the stories of an age when anything seemed possible. But the money is gone, scattered by the very forces the founder once warned against. The palaces stand as public monuments, while the lesson endures in every empty ballroom and faded ledger. Even the greatest fortune can vanish if it is not protected from itself. Today, more American wealth will transfer between generations than ever before, over $84 trillion by 2045, according to Cerulli Associates. Yet, without structure or purpose, even unimaginable fortunes can vanish. The Vanderbilt legacy is a warning. Money alone never guarantees endurance. In every era, the true test is not what you build, but what outlasts you. What will your legacy be? Share your thoughts below.